Wait, why is this recording? You guys are there? Oh, we're doing the MCU tier ranking list now. From Iron Man 1 up to Deadpool and Wolverine because the new movie really. Okay, now I get why you guys are here. Anyway, let's jump into that because I have not done a video like this and I'm honestly very excited to see where I rank all these projects. So let's jump into it. Over the past 16 years, the MCU has released 34 films in the theaters, and I just have to say, some are good, some are great, some are bad, some are horrible, but some are in between. And we're here to discuss where I will rank each 34 of those films, including Deadpool and Wolverine, as if you didn't hear me say that in the title. Anyway, let's jump into the number 34th spot. For me, last place is going to have to go to Captain Marvel. Now, let me explain here. Captain Marvel is not a film for me. I think that it is very boring. It has some good jokes. It has a lot of good action sequences, and visual effects are great. But to me, it just didn't really get me into that character as much as I think I would have hoped for it to. And it was not as big as it was hoped that I was hoping it for it to be. And I've rewatched the film a few times to try and see if my perspective would change on it. But overall, just the story and everything feels really bland. Nick Fury's great in the film, but just the performances are fine. It's not a film for me, and it's overall pretty boring. Coming in at number 33 is a film that I had really hoped to love, but I do think has the best version of this character, which is The Incredible Hulk. Now, I rewatched every single MCU film leading up to Black Widow with its big Marvel release and it being Marvel being back in theaters and everything. I had watched that film for the first time then. I thought it was alright, but it does not have a great rewatchability. Although the two pros that I do like about this film is that it has by far one of, if not the best version of the Hulk we've seen in the MCU so far, and it also has a really great fight scene with Hulk and Abomination. Edward Norton is great in the film, and although they did recast him, I think that he was a good Bruce Banner, but we all do prefer Mark Ruffalo more. Not to mention, this film also does have some really good visuals, specifically with the Hulk and Abomination, and it does set up the leader, who I think we will be seeing in Captain America Brave New World, so I'm going to be excited to see where they take that character after, so many years. Number 32, Iron Man 2. I know that's probably going to shock some people, but if you have been listening to some of my MCU opinions since I started this channel back in 2022, you would know that Iron Man 2 is not really my jam. It does introduce Scarlett Johansson into the MCU as the Black Widow, and we do get a real, probably the best suit-up scene for Tony Stark in the beginning of the film, and a really great final fight scene. Just the story beats didn't really click with me, the dialogue for me wasn't that great, and I just felt the whole development of the story, it wasn't a story for me, and I kind of was just zoning out as I was watching it, and it was just not overall a film that I really typically enjoyed, and it's definitely my least favorite out of the Iron Man Tony Stark trilogy. Now, in this film, we do see Don Cheadle take up the role as War Machine James Rhodes, and we see him in the Iron Man suits, and he's amazing in it and everything. And I think that he is definitely one of, if not the biggest highlight of the film, when they introduce him and Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff in this film. Those are the two highlights, including that great suit-up scene with Tony Stark and the racing track in the beginning of the film. But overall, not really for me, and I really am excited to see Rhodey return in Armor Wars. Coming in at number 31 is going to be Thor: The Dark World. This is a film that I really did enjoy in the first 10-15 minutes because I enjoyed seeing how Asgard dealt with the aftermath of the first Avengers film and how they handled that with Loki. That, I think, was one of, if not the biggest pro of that film, and that is something I really did enjoy. And I don't hate this film as much as other people do. I don't necessarily even hate this film. It's just, this movie definitely needed some work, especially around its villain and some of the plot points with Jane and Thor and everything. It's just stuff that I really didn't enjoy, but I did love how they dealt with the aftermath of Loki invading Earth, and there were some really cool fights in this film, I will admit, and I really did enjoy those, and who knows, maybe we will see Thor cry over Wade Wilson's death in later films, because they did reuse the Thor the Dark World footage of that in Deadpool and Wolverine. It's a whole thing. If you guys haven't seen it yet, go see the movie. It's great. This isn't the plug for Deadpool and Wolverine. This is me saying that I don't really like Thor the Dark World that much, and that's why it's on the number 31 on the spot. Number 30 is going to go to Ant-Man and the Wasp. This film was one of the first Marvel films I actually went to go see in theaters, and at the time I enjoyed it. But when I rewatched it to see Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, it although it is entertaining and I do enjoy some of the jokes in the film and some of the plot points and Scott Lang, just I feel that they really do what a lot of films do. Like when some films hit the mark on comedy and that's one of the highlights walking out of the film that people talk about in the first film, then they usually up the ante in the next sequel. And they did that a little bit too much in this film, and it didn't really work for me that well. And I thought that the villain was definitely by far one of, if not the weakest of the MCU, even though we are going to see her again, I think, in Thunderbolts. So hopefully they'll have some sort of plan for her there. But I just feel like the villain didn't really click with me, and some of the comedy didn't. And all overall, just the story felt really bland to me in a way. And there were some cool moments, though, I will admit. Giant Man was really cool. Seeing Hope Van Dyne, the Wasp, in action was one of my favorite parts. And I think that overall, it's not horrible, but just most of it didn't really click with me. For me, number 28 is going to have to go to The Marvels. This was a film that, if I'm being totally honest, felt like the most Disney-ified Marvel film that we could have gotten. And that's definitely something that I can say confidently, is that this felt very Disney-like, and it didn't really feel like an MCU film. It felt like a PG MCU film, which, I mean, I guess you could say is from Kamala Khan being in the film, but her being there isn't a flaw to me. That's honestly probably one of the strengths of this film that I really did enjoy, and to me, they just were really hyping up this movie to be a big game changer for the MCU, and it feels like that big post-credit scene reveal of Beast and Storm being Monica Rambeau's mom and everything, and just seeing those characters was added on and was just thrown in there just to get people to go see the film, which didn't work. And they obviously did that because now they probably don't have any plans for what they're going to do with that next, which is pretty disappointing. But honestly, it's just not a great film, although Kamala Khan does shine in it, and I think that she does a great job in her first MCU film, and she is one of my favorite characters to come out of the multiverse saga so far, so she did shine, but just it didn't really work for me that well, especially the post-credit scene was supposed to help us and probably was supposed to get us more hyped, but it just did the opposite for me, because you can tell that they probably added that pretty close to the release date to be like, oh, people aren't excited for this film. I mean, that whole post-credit scene just felt like they didn't have anything planned for the future, and I don't know. I'm still excited to see those characters return, just I don't know if we'll see it anytime soon. Alright, the hat's gone for number 27. Number 27 is going to be going to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. This was a film that I walked out very disappointed with when I first saw it. I did have some fun with it, but overall, it wasn't the best film, and it was being, again, described to be a big Avengers-type film, like the Marvels was for some reason, and it just wasn't. It just felt like the Quantum Realm felt like they were in one of those visual rooms where they just have the visual effects on the walls and everything. I don't remember what they're called. I don't remember what they're called at all, but one of those, it just felt like they were in the room. It didn't feel like they were anywhere special, like how it was in the original Ant-Man film with the Quantum Realm and everything. Like, that felt very real, very special, and very cool. Quantum Realm in this film just, it felt like a big CGI just splash everywhere. Although I did like Jonathan Majors as Kang, and I think that was a really great performance by him, and it was a really great version of Kang that he portrayed. And although, another flaw with Kang, how did he get beat by Ant-Man? Because he was set up to be such a big, threatening character, and I, including a lot of other people as well, probably thought that he was going to have a big fight with Ant-Man. Honestly, probably defeat him. I thought it was going to end on a big cliffhanger, leaving Ant-Man and the Wasp in the Quantum Realm, but they fixed it in like 2 seconds when it took them like 5 years to be able to get the technology to go to the quantum realm, and for some reason it took them 2 seconds the second time, which doesn't make any sense to me. But overall, only big thing that I don't like about this film is just a lot of things, but I do like Kang. I like Jonathan Majors. And I do like that little tease that they threw in at the end, which got me a little bit excited, but at the same time, I was like, okay, you could have ended on a note that would have set us up for stuff to come in the future. But I get it was a big contained Ant-Man story. Just maybe next time don't use Kang the Conqueror if that's the case, because when you have Kang in the film, it really feels like you're trying to set up for something bigger, and they didn't really play it off in that way. Coming in at number 27, to no surprise to anybody, one of the biggest disappointments from Marvel in the past few years for me, Thor: Love and Thunder. This is a film that I and many other people were very excited for, and I was almost as excited as I was for Thor: Love and Thunder as I was for Deadpool and Wolverine, and that is a very high excitement level. And I walked out being very disappointed, and I did not enjoy that film that much because the comedy, there were like two jokes out of the whole film that really clicked with me that I really liked. The story wasn't great, it wasn't really fleshed out well, and the whole Olympus thing was just kind of random. Well, not really random, like story wise, it was totally on point, but just the whole Olympus scene I didn't really like that much, and I felt like it was too comedic, and they were treating the gods to be too comedic, which I guess is in the version that they were kind of portraying was kind of accurate, but still. And also, I feel like Marvel should have taken a risk on this film earlier and gone with a slightly darker tone, because I feel like one of the biggest things is that we didn't see Gore the God Butcher butchering gods. We only saw that once in the opening scene, and I wish we saw that more. Although the reason why it's this high on the list is because I love that black and white fight sequence with Gore the God Butcher, and I think that that was really creative and really awesome. And I hope that we have fight scenes like that in big films like Avengers 5 and Avengers Secret Wars, because that would be pretty cool, and I really did like that scene a lot. Also, not to mention that I do like the ending where Thor takes Gore's daughter and takes care of her and everything, and I think that that's a really sweet ending. And honestly, it just wasn't a great film overall, though. I did like those two parts about it, though. Number 26, this may shock some people, but it's going to go to Thor from 2011, the first film. I do like this film a lot, and it is a very great installment, and it's a great way to portray Thor and introduce him to the MCU, to have him come down, be banished from Asgard, and kind of live the life of a human, and then have to redeem the hammer back and everything. I really like that. And it also sets up Loki for the big villain that he's going to be, and it starts out his arc of becoming a villain straight to the one who's holding together the MCU, which is an amazing story arc, may I add. But this film, it felt messy, and I mean, it didn't really feel messy, but it was very simple, which I liked. But there were just some beats that I didn't really click with, and it's overall just not really a film necessarily made for me. And there are some films that are just like, I don't see any problems with it. It's just not really a movie that's made for me. Although I do enjoy it at some points, it's just overall not a film that I really necessarily would just turn on randomly. You know, like it's not a film that I would go back to revisit, even if I had to for another Thor film. It's just a film overall not made for me. And yes, there are some films like that. And I wish there weren't, but, you know, there just are. And this just happens to be one of them. Number 25 is going to be going to Eternals. I do like this film more than the first Thor movie, and here's why. I was not expecting to like Eternals as much as I did. I do think that it was a little bit too long, and it is one of the, on the more like, it has a great story, and one of its biggest flaws is it has too many characters, and there's too many things going on in the film at once. Like they kill some of the main Eternals, which I guess serves the story, but I also just don't really like that, and it just had way too many characters, way too many things going on, and it had a lot to catch up on for the MCU, and this was just overall a film that not a lot of people liked, but I liked it. It's not something I would go and rewatch unless we probably had a sequel for Eternals coming, which I don't think we will anytime soon because of its failure. But I did like the film. I didn't think it was boring. I thought that the visuals were amazing, and I really did like some of the fights in the film. And I thought that I think the speedster's name is Makari. I think. I think that she did great, and I think that that speedster movement, like the way that they designed how she runs and everything, is probably the best way that a speedster has looked in live action for any film. Um, and yeah, I mean, Icarus becoming the villain and him flying into the sun, I feel like it's probably predictable for some. It wasn't for me because, well, I don't know. I mean, he was great as well, but I think that the villain. See, I don't even remember the villain's name. Like one of the beings that was on Earth that were attacking them, like the one that kind of turned more and more human, the more Eternals it killed. That thing was just dumb. I didn't like that thing at all. It didn't even really become a villain. It was just really stupid to me. And overall, film's not perfect. It's not great, but it's decent. It's all right. It's definitely not one of the best installments to the MCU. But hey, I like it more than most, but not by like a long shot. Number 24 also may shock some people, but I'm going to have to go with Ant-Man. This film was one of the films that opened up a whole new genre to the MCU of a heist story slash a comedy, and I enjoyed that aspect of it, and I thought that it was really great. It's just, there's some things about the film I don't necessarily enjoy, and there are some great visuals in this film. There's not really anything to me that's bad about this movie, and it honestly sometimes when I rewatch it, it gets better each time, but there are just some small flaws I don't really enjoy about the film. I feel like the pacing is a little bit off, and I feel like it probably could have used a few extra minutes in the film. But overall, not a horrible film, not a bad movie at all. It's decent. It's all right. It's good. I would rewatch it again. We're starting to get into that I would rewatch it territory. So from the movies here on out, I would probably rewatch again if I had to for an upcoming film, or if I just was like, hey, let me put on a film. I would probably rewatch them. But Ant-Man, not my favorite film, but it's not a horrible movie either, and it's good for what it's meant to be. Okay, this may make some people upset, but number 23 is going to go to Iron Man 3. Now, let me explain. I do like a lot of the things about this film, and as you can probably tell, I enjoy it more than most people do. Um, but I just love how we get to see Tony Stark without his tech and kind of just go on this journey, kind of just because this is the aftermath of the first Avengers. So he's having like panic attacks and everything about what he saw, and he's having visions and everything like that. Then he meets this kid, and I think that that's a really great story. And him being away from home, and the whole brutal attack on his mansion and everything, and how he just is presumably dead, but then he leaves, and I thought that all of that was really well done, and I thought that the whole thing about him like not having a suit is great, and I love that scene of him just going to the hardware store to create a way to break into where the Mandarin lives. And by the way, that Mandarin reveal, while yes, it does suck, I thought it was pretty funny, and I thought it was played off well, because we did actually get to see the real Mandarin in Shang-Chi: The Legend of the Ten Rings, so you know it paid off in the end. But overall, not a great film, but it is decent, and I do like it, and it's a pretty good film, and I like it more than most, as you can definitely tell on this list. And I would rewatch it, and I love that final battle where we have all the different Iron Man suits come out and everything. The one flaw with this film, though, is I do not like the villain. The villain, like, I'm so sorry, guys. I am, like, because I haven't rewatched these films in so long, but, like, the guys turn to fire and all that stuff like that. I don't like those guys. I thought that the villains are probably the weakest point of this film, and I think that they probably could have done better with the villains, but, it's whatever. This is my number 23, and let's get into number 22. Number 22 is going to have to go to Black Widow. So there's a lot of things that I don't necessarily enjoy about this film, but again, unlike most, I do find this film to be pretty good. So I think this film came out about 6 to 8 years too late. I mean, Obviously, COVID and everything did not help with that, and that's why it came out when it did. But it was always set to come out after Civil War. This film takes place between Civil War and Infinity War, and I wish that it had come out in that time because that probably would have made it such a better film, and a lot more people probably would have appreciated it because of that. And not a lot of people really do. And yes, it was the first film back in theaters for Marvel after a year and a half, and I think that it served its purpose in that respect. That wasn't its main purpose, but it did serve its purpose in that respect. I love that we finally gave Natasha Scarlett Johansson the spotlight, and gave her own film. And she now we have all the Avengers have had a film or at least a solo project based on their character, and it introduced us to her family. We're gonna be seeing her father again. Red Guardian again in Thunderbolts next year, which I'm very excited about. Can't wait to see where they're going to go with him. And Yelena. Yelena is by far one of the best parts of this film. One of the best characters to come out of Phase 4 and the whole multiverse saga as of right now. Just overall, good film, but there are flaws with it. Like, it came out too late. Again, there's some villain problems with it. Like, I get that it's like Black Widow's main villain, but I feel like we've touched on that villain so much. I feel like we just could have gone a different route possibly. And I mean, this film, honestly, it felt like classic Marvel in some respects, but in most respects, it was kind of the beginning of this, like, quote unquote downfall that a lot of people have presumably assumed Marvel is in. I don't think Marvel's in a downfall, at least not anymore. I mean, I kind of felt that a little bit when the Marvels came out, but other than that, Marvel hasn't really had a downfall. This was just the first film that people were very divided about, and I see why. Not perfect, and it's not like the main film that people think of when they think of Marvel, but it's not horrible. Number 22 on this list is going to go to Spider-Man Far From Home. As a diehard Spider-Man fan myself, this film is very enjoyable, and it's a really, really, really fun film, but it is not a Spider-Man film, and you can never convince me that it is, because, I don't know, I love the suit that we get in this film. The upgraded suit, the black and red, is great. It's phenomenal. Probably my favorite Spider-Man suit besides the final swing suit and the Andrew Garfield TASM 2 suit. The visuals are really awesome. Mysterio's alright in the film. I feel like they could have done him a little bit better. And I know I made a mistake a while back in one of my videos saying that, oh, he's not supposed to be based off of technology, but he really is. I feel like they could have still just had him wear that suit in the final battle instead of it just being like this mocap suit, which I get that it's the mocap suit and I get the purpose for it. I feel like they could have at least put effort in to build that suit for him to wear because it would look better. It would look so much better. But we did get to see the suit in action. It was fun. We got a good suit. It just doesn't feel like a Spider-Man movie to me. I mean, and it really did lean into that whole Iron Boy Jr. thing that I never really understood or got until I saw this film. I understood it a little bit, but I'm not totally supportive of the Iron Boy Jr. thing. I mean, I think that they totally lean into that a lot in this film, but I don't really like calling him Iron Boy Jr., especially now where Spider-Man is at in the MCU, but at this point in time, it seems accurate to call him that. And I just wish that this was I wish that Far From Home was the beginning of seeing Peter be more independent and be on his own after Tony had died. I feel like that would have worked way better. But we're there now with Spider-Man, with Peter anyway. I feel like Far From Home had a huge missed opportunity with having that film be a grounded, focused film. And I feel like that was just a missed opportunity. And I feel like they did Mysterio a little bit dirty in this film. But it did set up one of the best Spider-Man films of all time. So I'm not complaining about that one. Alright, we're in the top 20. And this one is going to be going to Thor Ragnarok. I said it. It's going to Thor Ragnarok, okay? This film is heavily, heavily overrated. Or not, like, don't emphasize heavily. It's a little bit overrated, and I understand why people like it. It's just, I rewatched this film recently. It's not necessarily a great film. Is it better than Thor Love and Thunder? Obviously, yes. Is it still in my top 20 MCU films? Yes. But, just, the comedy doesn't really click with me anymore after my rewatch a few months ago. And overall, just I find myself looking at my phone a lot during this film when I rewatch it. It's still a rewatchable movie. It's still somewhat enjoyable. Just it's definitely gone down in my rankings and my tier lists and everything since my rewatches because I've noticed, hey, I don't really like this film as much as I did before, and I wish that I still liked it as much as I did before, but I sadly don't. And I still think it's better than Thor: Love and Thunder. It's better than every single other movie on the list that I put before, but it's just disappointing that I don't like it as much. And we do get a really great Hulk. We get a lot of great Loki and Thor moments. We get Hela, who's a very menacing villain. We get a giant wolf, who I think that was really awesome to see Hulk and that giant wolf fight. We get Surtur, which I think was really cool to see him. And we get really great visuals. And we get him becoming the god of, fully embracing the god of thunder. But overall, I wish I liked it more than I do after my rewatches. And let's move on to the top 20. Alright, number 19 is going to be going to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, as I'm recording this, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, while it's not a bad movie, it did not feel like a multiverse of madness. It did not feel like what it was being set out to be like. It did have some good cameos, but I feel like the cameos were just all thrown in there just like, hey, there's a bunch, let's just pile all these cameos onto you in this film and get them killed off in 2 minutes, I feel like that was not a smart move, and I don't think that was the best thing for them to do, but it's whatever. It was still a fun time. America Chavez was great, and I can't wait to see her again whenever we see her again in the MCU. Seeing the Scarlet Witch be a villain was also really fun, and she had some really, quote-unquote scary moments, I guess, because this is a horror film in some respects because we had Sam Raimi direct it, which this was also his directorial debut for the MCU, which I thought he did a good job, and I really do want him to return soon for the MCU, possibly for Spider-Man 4. I don't know if we're ever going to know that, though, because we haven't been getting any updates on that film. But overall, it had some good cameos. I just didn't know if they really served the story well. And just, I don't know. Multiverse of Madness did not live up to the hype like we had other multiverse films do. Oh, also, not to mention that I do not like that they made America Chavez into a sorcerer at the end of the film, considering that she can travel to any multiverse that she wants, any universe that she wants with her power. So I think that's really dumb as well. 18 is going to be going to Doctor Strange, the first film. And this film is not bad at all. This film has some amazing visuals and some great visual sequences, especially when he's in the astral plane and everything. And it has some really, really creative things that they do in this movie. But there's just some aspects I don't necessarily enjoy as much as I do with the other 17 Marvel films. This is another case for a Marvel film where I don't necessarily like the villain that much either, so that's definitely not a good thing for the film. I would say the villain is definitely the weakest point for this film. Highest point is definitely the visuals. I love the visuals and the visual sequences they do in this film. Everything is really creative. Number 17 is going to be going to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is a film that a lot of people think is the case with what I mentioned for Ant-Man and the Wasp, which is they notice that the comedy does really well, so they enhance that in the sequel. I noticed that, and I understand that, and there are some jokes in this film that don't work for me, and some people think that none of the jokes really work because of how abusive they were with that aspect of the film in some ways, but I don't find this film to be as bad as people describe it to be. I think of the Guardians movies as this big chapter of the first film being about the mother. This is actually what James Gunn described it as well, and I agree with him totally, which is why I'm saying it. He said the first film was about the mother, second film is about the father, and the third film is about the self. I think that is perfectly described for the film, and when you think of it in that respect, you understand why it went in the directions that it did, and they did kind of make Drax into a joke in this film, which was the start of that, and I don't necessarily like him as a joke, being a joke in these films, although it did grow on me a little bit, especially in Volume 3. because they do touch on that a lot, and they do touch on that in Volume 3, which I appreciate that they recognized. Um, but I wish we could have seen him be more of a badass than just a goofball, you know? And Baby Groot was great. Um, a lot of things that I did like in this film with their pair ups, like how they paired up each character. Like we had Rocket, Baby Groot, and Yondu together, which was one of my favorite trios in the Guardians trilogy, and I think that was really great. And the big reveal with Ego was also really fun, or not fun. It was not fun at all, but it had that shock value that made the movie fun. Um, but it definitely did lean more into the comedy, which is probably one of my biggest flaws about it. But definitely my biggest flaw is how they made Drax into a joke. But they did introduce a character called Mantis, who I do really like, and I think is one of the most like fun, sweet, and like genuine characters that we've seen from the MCU. And I really hope that we see her possibly in the future. Although I don't know, and I don't know if they should revisit the Guardians characters, but I mean, it's overall a fun film. Do they abuse the comedy and turn Jax into a joke? A little bit. I wouldn't even use the word abuse. I would just say that they overdo the comedy a little bit because most jokes don't really work for me. Some do, some don't. But they do turn Drax into a joke, and that's definitely something that catches me off guard every time I watch it. I'm like, wow, he really just turned into a joke. But I mean, I guess that kind of fits with the story but you know, overall, not a horrible movie. It's still fun and enjoyable, and I would 1,000% rewatch this. And I would even do a Guardians marathon again and rewatch all three Guardians films together. That would be fun. But other than that, it's not really a film that I would necessarily put in like my top 10 for Marvel films on rewatchability and just in general. Number 15 is going to go to Spider-Man Homecoming. I think that this is a really fun entry to the MCU, and it's a really fun and genuine and cool way to introduce and give Peter his own first MCU film and to establish Spider-Man in our universe. And for the version of Spider-Man that we see Tom Holland portray and how he was written and how he was adapted into the MCU, this film works in a lot of ways. I actually rewatched this film on my vacation when I was on the plane, and I had a lot of fun with it. And on the rewatch, I actually enjoyed it a lot. It's one of my more liked Spider-Man films in my Spider-Man ranking, but we're not doing a Spider-Man ranking. It's definitely one of the films that I enjoy more from on the Spider-Man side, and it is a very enjoyable and fun entry to the MCU. RDJ is also in the film. He does great. We see a lot of fun stuff in there, and it's just at its core about Peter wanting to be an Avenger and prove himself, which I think is a really great story. And to this day, even Kevin Feige says it, I think that he really became Spider-Man when he lifted that giant piece of rubble off of him. But there are also more respects that I think that he really became Spider-Man after No Way Home. I think that those were the two moments that really defined his character and helped him learn the most. So, overall, fun film, and it's a good Spider-Man film. Some of you may be surprised that it's this high on my list, but number 15 is going to go to Avengers Age of Ultron. The reason why it's this high is some things that are personal, because it was my first ever MCU film that I turned on my TV, on my parents' TV, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then I went out and bought the Lego games for it, played it on my Wii U, and I fell in love with the MCU from there. So, in most respects, it's my first ever MCU film that I really fell in love with the MCU. I would love Marvel beforehand, but the MCU I really just loved after this film, and that's what started my obsession to who I am today. I mean, I love Ultron. One thing is I wish they could have left him in the MCU longer and not made him a one-off character. Yes, we have Infinity Ultron, and I was really happy when they brought him back for that, but again, they just kind of did a one-off for him too. But, getting Savage Hulk was pretty awesome. Hulkbuster vs. Hulk was great. This is still the MCU film where I say the Avengers are most like the Avengers because they're together this whole film, and that whole opening scene with all the Avengers fighting in Sokovia in the forest and everything was really great. And I thought that was probably one of the best Avengers scenes where we have all 6 of them together. That was just a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun with that whole opening scene with all of them. And this film started the domino effect to set up Avengers Endgame, because this film started the divide between the Avengers, and it caused them to, get the Sokovia Accords. Sokovia Accords caused the Avengers to split up. When they split up, they lost in Infinity War. That led to Endgame, and that led to where we are now. This really started, and this is where they first name dropped Endgame, and this is where they really started that huge domino effect for the MCU. And I love the visions that Tony gets. I think that the visuals on that are amazing. And overall, I mean, it's a really great film, and you guys are probably shocked that it's this high, but it's mostly the reason why it's this high is definitely mainly because of it being the first ever MCU film that I've watched that made me fall in love with the MCU in general. Number 14 is going to go to Captain America: The First Avenger. I think this is a heavily underrated movie, and I personally love it every single time that I rewatch it. I've rewatched it a few times, and I really do enjoy it every single time. It's a very enjoyable film, and it's really fun, and it is one of the most impactful films for the MCU to date. I feel like, as Captain America being a solo character, it's just very impactful for his character and the MCU, and it's a very fun movie, and I love Red Skull as a villain, and it was really cool to see him return in Infinity War because everybody really liked him, and I thought that that was not as a villain, yes, but as a character, no. But I really liked a lot of stuff about this movie, and it really shocked me the first time I watched it because I was like, okay, this film's probably not going to be too good, but it actually is really good. It was a really pleasant surprise for me, and overall, pretty good film, and that's why it's this high. Number 13 is going to go to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I adored this film the first time I watched it. While it did, my expectation, I'm going to admit it straight here, first time I've ever admitted this, my expectations for Shang-Chi were way too high, and it really did ruin my first experience watching the film, because so many people have been saying, oh my god, it's so good, it's one of the best Marvel films, so my expectations were through the roof, and I was overall disappointed with it when I first watched it, because I was like, people are really calling it that great, like, I don't understand, but now, looking back on it almost 3 years later, it's a really great film, and it's a really great, that's what Marvel really needed at that time, was just a great film. That film felt like Marvel, and yes, it was like the second film that they had released in 2021 to kick off Phase 4, but we had a lot of hit or miss TV shows at that point that was kind of throwing people off a little bit with Marvel, and this kind of put it back on track, and I think that it was a really, really great installment to the MCU, and I hope that we get Shang-Chi 2 soon. Number 12 is going to go to Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This film was a beautiful tribute to Chadwick Boseman, and it was a really good installment, and I love how they handled the death of T'Challa and how they did that in the MCU. I thought that that was really great, and it was a really enjoyable film, one of the most emotional MCU films that we've gotten to date. Although I do think that they should have just recasted him, because I feel like they could have done a great way to honor Chadwick's legacy through recasting the character and carrying on the Black Panther legacy, but I am going to have complete respect for what they chose, and this is what they chose, and I thought that Shuri was actually a pretty good Black Panther, and I'm not going to be complaining about her being Black Panther now, because she was a pretty good Black Panther, and I'm very, very happy with how that film turned out. Namor, one of the best villains we've gotten in the MCU by far. There's a lot of great stuff about this film. Is it a little bit too long? Maybe. But it's it's as long as it needs to be, and I'm very, very happy with how that film turned out. And I think that it was really great. Action sequences and fight sequences were really good. Not as good as the first Black Panther movie, but it's still overall a big, huge step for the MCU at that time, and I enjoyed the film a lot, and it is definitely going to go down for me as one of, if not the most emotional MCU film we've gotten to date. Number 11 is going to go to Black Panther 1. This film opened up the MCU to a whole entire new area and world of the MCU that we've never explored before, and they did it in such a great way, where we all had so much fun with this film, and everything about it was great. I mean, Chadwick's performance was amazing, and just literally everything about that film was near perfect, and I love how they did that movie, how they paced it, how they fit the comedy in. The action was really awesome. Killmonger is one of my favorite Marvel villains. The Black Panther movies really do a great job with their villains, so I'm hoping that if they do a Black Panther 3, that they do have another killer villain, because Killmonger was probably one of my favorite parts of this film. I love the flashback sequences. The fights are great. Shuri is hilarious, and there's just a lot of fun stuff to unpack for this film. Then it was overall a really fun film. All right, now we're entering the top 10, and I'm going to give the number 10 spot to Iron Man 1 from 2008, the big main starter for the MCU, probably the biggest film for the MCU. RDJ's big performance as Iron Man, the I Am Iron Man line, and just everything about this film is great. And the rewatchability for this now is through the roofs because it's just you look at it and you're like, wow, look at how far we've come from the first MCU film up until now, and we get some great fun sequences of him trying to build a suit and everything like that. Built a suit in a cave with a box of scraps and all that stuff. The villain is again like a generic Marvel or just superhero villain. At the time, obviously, it was a big villain because this was 2008. Let's be honest. Um, but it is a good villain. Suits are great. I love how we got three different suits in this film, and I think that the Iron Man 1 suit through all the Iron Man suits that we got from Iron Man 1 until the first Avengers are some of my favorite Iron Man suits of all time, and it's just honestly, man, this is a really great film, and it's a really nostalgic one for MCU fans now too, and it's definitely is for me. Number 9 is going to go to Deadpool and Wolverine. I just saw this film yesterday as I'm recording this. This is probably going to be coming out the same day as the Marvel panel for San Diego Comic-Con, but I just saw the film yesterday. It's a really fun film, really great. It's probably the funniest MCU film we've gotten to date, and it's obviously in some ways the X-Men's debut into the MCU, and they do it in a really fun way. And this film, in a lot of ways, doesn't even feel like an MCU film. It just feels like a casual Deadpool movie, which I love about this film. And they obviously have those huge jabs at Marvel in some of the scenes that honestly were very shocking at some points. But overall, it's a really fun movie. Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds kills it. Hugh Jackman kills it. We get some stellar cameos that had the theater just bursting out, just cheering, and it was just awesome. And it really gave me that nostalgia of the No Way Home experience. And although it has some story flaws and villain flaws, I think that it definitely has a memorable villain, especially for how Cassandra Nova has these the way that she uses her powers is kind of disturbing in some ways, and it's uncomfortable, and it had me going ew, sometimes, and it was just great film. This is exactly what the MCU needs as of right now, and I couldn't be more happier with how this film turned out, especially because it's literally just three best friends making a film together, and you can tell, man, they had so much fun. We had so much fun. There's a lot of great stuff in that movie, and that's why it's my number 9. My number 8 is going to go to Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is by far one of my favorite Marvel movies, as you can tell, and I think that the whole spy thriller thing that they went with in this film is really great, and it fits really well with this version of Captain America. And I love having Bucky return as the Winter Soldier, and this is probably one of Chris Evans' best performances as Captain America, in my opinion. And getting that team up with him and Natasha Romanoff was a lot of fun. And again, that whole spy as thriller idea concept of the movie was really fun, and I really did enjoy it. Overall, it's one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's one of the best Captain America movies, and it's a very memorable movie that I would go back and watch every now and then. I may even rewatch it before Captain America: Brave New World because it's a really fun movie. Number 7 is going to go to Spider-Man: No Way Home. This film was a huge game changer, not only for big Spider-Man fans, but for the MCU, because at this point in time, the MCU was kind of going through a big struggle with how their TV shows hadn't been doing so great. Eternals had just come out, and not a lot of people loved that. But I loved No Way Home. It was by far the best theater experience I've ever had in my entire life. It's still, a lot of people were just hating on it now, but I personally don't understand that. I mean, it's just a love letter to Spider-Man fans, just like how Deadpool and Wolverine is a love letter to Fox, X-Men, and Fantastic Four fans. And in those respects, it's amazing. And I feel like the way that they handle Tom Holland's character and how he develops as Peter Parker in this film is really great. And seeing Toby and Andrew return is just a dream, and I really hope that we see all three of them together again in Secret Wars. And overall, this is a film that I'm never going to forget, and I will rewatch this just randomly sometimes. If I'm feeling No Way Home, I'm going to rewatch No Way Home. And it's just overall such a fun time, and I really can't wait to see Tom Holland's Peter in the MCU again, because this film is just, it's just so fun. Coming in at number 6 is going to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This film has such a close and special place in my heart, and it is such a beautiful movie that James Gunn had done, and he did a send-off for these characters in possibly the most perfect way you could have done a send-off for those characters. The Guardians of the Galaxy means so much to me, and those characters have really impacted my experience and love for the MCU, and to see them go was very sad, but their big closing goodbye and that whole final scene just gives me chills thinking about it, and it's just such a beautiful ending. Everybody did an amazing job, and I don't really want to see these characters again because of how perfect that ending was. I don't want them to affect that, especially if James Gunn doesn't return again. I mean, this film is just amazing. I did go see the Guardians Marathon, so I saw all 3 of the films in theaters, and it was a late night, but let me just tell you, man, walking out of that theater, I was, like, so upset, like, just because they're gone, but also because it had a really great ending. The High Evolutionary is a really menacing and really good villain. He does yell a lot. And some of the creations that he did is just brutal and just kind of weird. It's just weird. And then him blowing up that whole planet was just so shocking. But it just made him such a menacing character. And I really don't have any flaws with this film. I just wish it was longer so we could spend more time with them, really. Alright, we're in the top 5 now. And number 5 is probably going to be going to Captain America Civil War. This film is one of the best comic book films in my opinion because of that whole airport fight sequence, first introduction to Black Panther and Spidey into the MCU. When we get some really great fights, we get Spidey versus Cap, you get Iron Man versus Cap, which is probably the biggest fight of the film, and you get a lot of great team combos that honestly you probably, as a Marvel fan in that period of time in 2016, you probably wouldn't have even imagined to see something like that, but it happened, and it was honestly really fun, and it's good. It's one of my favorite MCU films, and I would rewatch this film in a heartbeat. Zemo is a great menacing villain, and his character and how he's just a normal guy, the effects that he created for the Avengers. This was the second film that I feel had that created that big domino effect to lead into Avengers Endgame, because the Avengers split up, and if they hadn't split up, they probably would have defeated Thanos, and that wouldn't have led to Endgame and all that stuff like that. But this film is really awesome. Introduction to Spidey and Black Panther could not have been more perfect, and it was a big game changer for the MCU, and it definitely paid off because everybody was divided on this film. Everybody in the real world were like picking sides and everything, and I mean, it's like a Charles Xavier and Magneto kind of situation where I understand where they're coming from on both sides, but sometimes you gotta like lean for a specific side, and I don't even know what side I would choose. I mean, I think that I originally chose Iron Man's side, Tony's side, but I think over recent years I've switched more to Captain America, like most people. But you know, Team Cap all the way. Number 4 is gonna go to Avengers Endgame. It's not higher. It's not higher on the list just because the other 3 films I think are phenomenal. But you know, Avengers Endgame, great closing to the Infinity Saga. We couldn't have asked for a more perfect ending. And although the ending was perfect, the film isn't perfect itself. It is very long, but that doesn't really affect it that much. I don't like Professor Hulk at all in this film, or at all in general. But I do think that this film is a really great closing to the Infinity Saga, and it serves its purpose in many ways. It's great for what it's supposed to be, and it is probably one of the most emotional MCU films. Obviously, I think Wakanda Forever is slightly more emotional, and same with Guardians 3, but this one's definitely up there as well, and it serves its purpose as an Infinity War Part 2. Now in my top 3, I gotta put Avengers 1. This redefined comic book movies in so many different ways. Like, people were like, how can you put Tony Stark in the same room as Thor? You can't. That's why this film works so well, because these are characters that aren't meant to be together, but it works, and it's just really great, and I really had fun with this film. I would rewatch this film in a heartbeat, and it's just a lot of fun. Coulson's one of my favorite Marvel characters of all time, so it was sad to see him die, but this is a real game changer, especially for the character of Loki, because this set Loki on a whole new path in the MCU that I think in both universes, in both versions of Loki that we've seen in the MCU, he was always going to be on that path to being somewhat good. Um, but he died early, and then we saw him again in the same scene in Avengers become the God of Stories. But this film was really awesome. It redefined comic book movies. It's one of my favorite comic book movies of all time. And to see the Avengers team up was really great, and all of them in their classic suits, and Hulk, and getting the best Iron Man suit, and some of the best MCU lines and everything was just so great. And I thought that Joss Whedon did a great job with this movie, and I think that it's a very awesome film, and I would definitely should rewatch it soon. Now, the top two are really difficult for me, but if I had to guess, or if I had to make a final decision, which I really do because I'm really crunched for time right now, I am going to have to go with Avengers Infinity War at my number 2. This film is amazing. I was very young when this came. I was young when this came out, and I was really trying to go see it in theaters, but I couldn't. It was very fun, and this movie, although it doesn't necessarily feel like a comic book movie, it feels like it's a great film that just has superheroes in it. Is how I usually think of it sometimes, but it's overall amazing. The Russo brothers did a phenomenal job at being able to handle so many characters and to get these amazing interactions with different characters who you would never expect to interact before. It was just so surreal to see. Like the Guardians interacting with Spider-Man, I never thought I would see that in a million years. And it was just great, and I had a lot of fun with this film. Thanos is a very menacing villain, and this was a film that really changed the game for the MCU, not just because of the snap, but because they lost. And I thought that that was a really great and unique aspect at the time. Obviously, losing in Marvel stuff is kind of like it's not something that we aren't like used to, you know. But it definitely redefines the MCU, and it definitely set high goals for Endgame, which they achieved. And I think that this film is just overall really, really awesome, and it is just awesome. If you guys couldn't tell, number 1 is Guardians of the Galaxy. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Honestly, before Age of Ultron, Guardians was one of the things that I loved and I wanted to watch. I watched the animated series. I played the games that they had Guardians on for. Ronan is a great villain. The comedy hits every single time in this film. That found family aspect is something that I adore and love about not just this film, but films in general. And this setting up Rocket's backstory all the way back in 2014, 9 years later, getting the full circle moment is just really crazy. And I love the foreshadowing. Groot, the sacrifice, everything about that was amazing. The final fights, the dance off, everything was just, oh my god, just so good, man. And I fear nothing is ever gonna really top this film the way that it really did for me. But that's my number 1, and Guardians of the Galaxy is just really great, and that's a 10 out of 10 for me. And oh my god, don't get me started on that damn soundtrack. That soundtrack is one of the best movie soundtracks ever, and I mean that. But anyway, that was my ranking of all 34 MCU films. Man, I have a lot to edit now. I will see you guys on the other side. This video is probably going to be coming out on the 27th of July, if not very late on the 26th. I'm going to see Deadpool and Wolverine again right now, so I probably won't be out till tomorrow. So expect this video to come out 27th. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is my first time ever just doing a ranking like this. So it's going to be very, very fun to edit together. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know, where does Deadpool and Wolverine rank on your list? Let me know in the comments below, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys. Actually, when this video comes out, I'll see you guys tonight, because we're going to be doing a watch party for San Diego Comic-Con, so I hope you guys tune into that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and peace out, guys.